In this episode, join us as we set the Wayback Machine to 1987 to check out INXS's monster breakthrough album, Kick. Stay with us. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Dean Legiro here, along with Eric Kuber. How are you?
Hello, I am great. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. You know what? We should have just hit record because we spent 20 minutes talking about Multiverse of Madness, and we're not doing a show on it for some strange reason, but we just kind of did a mini show and didn't even talk about this beforehand.
Right? Hey. And, we seem to be hitting the, we seem to be hitting the mark of we did Book of Boba Fett and that obviously was not so great. And, we were kind of going back and forth on how much we actually enjoyed Multiverse of Madness, to a sense. So, yeah. So
the quick review is 2 thumbs up. we'll save you the hour of us bullshitting.
Is back. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
And we both enjoyed it. So there's a little mini capsule review of Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
And now we can push that out of the way and put aside the 20 minutes we spent talking about it and not prepping for this show and talk about what we're doing here. So while I bluff for time, join us on social media at 3324 Podcast. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. We would love to see you there. Just come on over. It's just so fun. A lot of great content, a lot of great people. It's just a great community. If you like music and movies, go check us out. Yep. Join us on Facebook. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
We encourage it. And if you listen on Spotify, you can actually give us not a review, but a rating.
A rating.
So if you listen to us
give us those 5 stars.
Yeah, come on.
I said it this time.
Thank you. You've been very tentative about it, but yeah, 5 stars all the way. Why not?
Yeah,
we deserve it.
We do.
Right? Like
hey,
Wilford,
we're dedicated.
Like Wilford Brimley used to say, it's the right thing to do. Right?
Come on, guys. Let me back in. We're
Wilford Brimley. We're going deep. We're going hard and deep on the reference.
Come on, I'm all right now. Let me back in. Let me, what am I referencing there?
You could go with Cocoon.
There you go. There it is.
His diabetes commercials. You can go with what was he was doing some commercial for food like oatmeal, right?
Oatmeal, yeah. Quaker Oats, I think. Yeah, I think it was
the right thing to do.
It's right.
Eat Quaker Oats. So Wilford Brimley getting more attention than he's gotten in quite some time.
Yeah, so the natural.
We should do a salute. We should do a 2-part episode. Salute to Wilford Brimley and Frank Stallone.
We do this often. We talk about, we actors and certain, we really pull these people out, and we really should start doing episodes about specific actors, people, situations, maybe. I don't know.
Cool.
Something down the road.
How about
anyway,
we'll do an episode about the villains that talk too much.
Right? Oh, that's a good one.
The trope of the over talking villain,
of the monologue. Yeah,
yes, the monologuing villain that
yes.
and then the guy saws out of the rope with a paper clip while the guy's talking. And that would take about a year to do. Anyway,
so many.
Let's get back on track. We are
get back on track with the music here.
Yeah, we're going back to 1987. INXS, their album Kick. Let's talk the stats. We'll get this going. Released in October of 1987, produced by Chris Thomas. 4 top 10 singles. Wow. Yeah. New Sensation hit number 3. Never Tear Us Apart hit number 7. Devil Inside hit number 2. And then finally, they would hit number 1 with Need You Tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Hit number 3 on the charts. 6 times platinum, which means it sold more than 6 million copies.
Yeah. In INXS.
I was waiting.
See? There you go.
It sold in excess of 6 million copies. We've been waiting 67 or 68 episodes
to say that.
Where
to
the
say it in
artist,
context.
Where the artist matches the catchphrase.
Yep.
It's taken us a while, but it's like, you know what? Let's just do this damn episode so we can say it.
I'm really shocked that we did not cover this album sooner because you absolutely were obsessed with this cassette. I remember.
Oh yeah,
distinctly.
Oh yeah.
This was a car driving around, and you had this on when this album came out. You were playing it all the time, and yet the most interesting thing,
and yet,
here's the thing.
But
this was a very, very interesting album to revisit because I never had it.
But you listened to it so many times through me.
Well, here's the thing, though. Every time I remember hearing it, I remember hearing the hits. And there's certainly enough of them, but but there's a whole other side to this album. I don't remember any of the album tracks whatsoever. Even when I listened to it and prep for this, I do not remember these songs. And that it blew my mind. I was like, what? I just don't remember him. I don't remember hearing these songs being played while we were driving around. It was always the hits. I don't know whether you were rewinding just the first side.
No, I think I went through them all. I think I played this. You're right. I played, I played the shit out of this tape and then the CD. And they actually, I don't know if you remember this, back in the VHS days, they used to release like those video albums, like, and they had one called Kick. It was called Kick the Video Flick. And it was just like 5 of their music videos. So I had the video, just watch the videos, because they were kind of stitched together. So yeah, I was all in on this album for some reason. And it's just an incredible album. I mean, it's really just so good. And we're going to look at 87. I mean, class of 87 was chock full of, you got the Joshua Tree, Appetite for Destruction, Hysteria by Def Leppard, Faith by George Michael.
A formidable year, to be
Tango
sure.
in the Night by Fleetwood Mac.
Yep.
Bad by Michael Jackson. Whitesnake's Monster album. So there was just a lot of great music. Music for the Masses, Depeche Mode. Anthrax was, Among the Living. George Harrison, Cloud 9, Nothing Like the Sun, Sting. So much great music came out in 87. Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it when I looked. And this was like right there with it. This was swinging with, punching above its weight. Like if you're hanging with Michael Jackson as far as album sales and you're hanging with Guns N' Roses at the time, and George Michael, Faith was another monster. And INXS was right in there battling it out. 4 top 10 hits. You can't dispute this album. So
yeah, everybody was kind of in their own. They came into their own. Like U2 was riding high, and everybody found their
hit their stride.
Hit their stride, and by this is past the midpoint of the 80s. We're heading into the 90s, and everybody was just going strong. And so yeah, I mean, but yeah, this album in particular. I mean, I recall listening to INXS. I mean, just MTV by 82. It was that first hit that they had with what's the Shabu Shabbat
was their album, and they had that song, the One Thing.
The One Thing.
That's the video when they're eating all the food and just smushing it all in their faces.
And I was like, what? It was one of those videos where you're like, what the hell is this? But it was a catchy song. It was a really great track. But yeah, and this album comes along, and it's. Again, a totally. You would think it's not a different sound, but it is. I mean, this is much more of an established, full-on dance album. I think.
Yeah, it's rock and funk. It's rock, absolutely. Melding those two.
Yeah.
Whereas the album before, Listen Like Thieves, was decidedly hard, which I really like.
It's a harder.
I highly recommend. Yeah. Like a great 1-2 punch is Listen Like Thieves and Kick. They really complement each other. But yeah, Listen Like Thieves was like the harder edge. They were going for that rock, audience, which they gained in the United States. That was like their, I think that hit number 11 on the charts. Listen Like Thieves. Yeah, a lot of great stuff from that. So that kind of set them up for this. And while let's kind of set the table. They're from Australia. They're the second biggest selling Australian group behind who? We did a podcast about them.
Jesus.
AC/DC.
AC/DC, yeah.
AC/DC. So you can't get, you can't beat Back in Black. So anything else is going to be maybe not even a close second, but they're right behind them. The group is comprised of Michael Hutchence on vocals, Kirk Pengilly, he plays guitar, but he also plays saxophone, which is another. Like he's a multi-tool player, and saxophone kind of, plays into the INXS sound. You know, it's not just there for no reason. Gary Beers. I didn't say his name twice. That's his name. Gary Beers plays bass. And then we get to the heart and soul of this group, which is the Farris brothers. You have Andrew Farris on keyboards, John Farris on drums, and Tim Farris on guitar. And the nucleus of this band is the Farris brothers. They were the original. They originally started the band called the Farris brothers, and then would evolve into INXS in 1979 with this same lineup, and this same lineup until the untimely passing of Michael Hutchence in 1997.
Yeah.
So I always like it. I like when bands stay together and don't rotate out, members kind of coming and going like the revolving door.
Yeah.
I kind of like I've always liked the one for all and all for one aesthetic of we're here, we're in it to win it together. I just
agree.
think it makes for a better band.
I agree. And, there's obviously you have your ups and downs, but, it shows that, there's dedication and they rise to the, to the challenge and they, you can't, bands, they're consistent too. Throughout the 80s, they were, consistently making records, and, you have bands that do stay together, but they make an album and then 6 years later, they, you don't hear from them and they keep coming back.
Or they start cycling through guitarists.
Well, it's almost like an obligation. It almost feels like this is a contractual obligation. We don't like each other necessarily, but we're just doing it for whatever.
We work together. Yeah, we work together,
Right.
Which is interesting. And I think one of the things I've always loved about INXS is just how they just sound so tight.
Yeah.
They're just really a tight sounding band because they've been together so long and they're just really in the pocket with each other. I just love, and this album in particular is just so well produced, especially in '87, where you had that, if you contrast it with Tango in the Night by Fleetwood Mac, just the sheen that you talk about on Tango in the Night is not present in this album. That was like that. We talk stereotypically about music from the '80s, just sounds really glossy and almost sugary sweet just because of the production values. And Kick doesn't really have that. Kick is got the funk elements, but then it's melded with rock, and it doesn't have that really slick sound to it.
It's not that slick production, but it is definitely an album of its time. I mean, it is an 80s, they are utilizing the toys of the day but it's they own it. There's a certain method, in the recording process where, you let this stuff really pop, on in the and there's not a lot of like reverb and a lot of like sort of like that glossy sheen.
It's just in your face.
Exactly.
It's just like this album is just in your face. Now you talked about production. Chris Thomas. Do you know about Chris Thomas?
I know we work with Pete Townsend a lot.
Well, here's something else.
Yeah.
Shocking revelation that I'm about to. You're get ready. Put a hat on because your mind is going to explode.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
Let's hear it.
Chris Thomas produced the Beatles.
Did he really?
He produced Birthday and Happiness is a Warm Gun on the White Album because George Martin was not available because I got to do something or whatever. You take over.
Wow.
And he ghost produced songs on the White Album and he played on the White Album. And he played on All Things Must Pass. In addition to doing his production, where he produced, he was a mixer. He mixed Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
This dude was prolific. And then when I read that he ghost produced the Beatles, I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
So
that is interesting.
There is another. What does Yoda say? There is another.
There is another.
So there's not three producers. There's a fourth.
There's a fourth
ghost producer. Which is Chris Thomas. So I thought that was kind of wild.
Wow. I know he worked with. I know a lot with Pete Townsend, especially his. I think he did LP Glass, but he did his all the best Cowboys of Chinese Eyes album with him, and that kind of stuff. So, I didn't know he was that prolific.
Yeah, Sex Pistols, great. Pretenders, Back to the Egg. I mean, this is all mixing stuff. Back to the Egg.
Yeah, some Paul McCartney. Yeah,
Elton John, Too Low for Zero. Just a lot of stuff across the board. Run Devil Run in '99 for McCartney. So he's a pretty prolific dude. And again, it's kind of that's what I love about this show is doing, bringing what we already know, which is a lot of useless crap. right? I bring a lot of baggage that's got a whole lot. I bring a lot of luggage, but a lot of it's just empty with empty knowledge.
Yeah.
But then also finding out new stuff too in us researching it. And so hopefully that works for the listeners as well.
No, it is fun because if we're blown away by something and we're getting old, it's
probably uber geeky. If we're blown away about these old geeks,
exactly. God, so it's always a learning curve.
Over a guy that getting all excited about this guy that produced 2 songs by the Beatles 50 something years ago. What does Shatner say in SNL? Get a life.
Yeah, but isn't that the point though? I mean, it's fun to
absolutely isn't.
To go
That's
back.
why we do this.
You as much as we think we know a lot,
there's always more to learn.
There is absolutely more to learn.
The learning never ends.
And in that stuff you find out, the things that you do know are sometimes changed, or so you have a different outlook on the way things were and the way things
it just did
recorded and
just changed my outlook on the Beatles.
Yep. So
I've held crazy. That for 50 years and shattered by INXS of all bands that would shatter a Beatles myth. Go figure. So most of the songs, there's a main songwriting team. Michael Hutchins and Andrew Farris are like the main songwriting team. They kind of took on the duties, which does give you some stability in the songwriting. There is one cover on this album. It's a song called The Loved One, which is a cover of an Australian group. And the name of the group is The Loved Ones.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like Wang Chung and Everybody Wang Chung Tonight. You put your own
1966, I think that song came out. Yeah. So that's as old as we are.
I don't know about that. I don't know how old you are, but I'm probably younger than that, I think.
Okay.
So in the run up to this album, this is something a couple things happened that was very interesting. Is they came off of the success of Listen Like Thieves. Their stated goal for their next album is they wanted to make an album where every song could be a single.
Yeah.
That was their stated goal. And I've never heard anything like that before. Usually you go in with a theme, or you're trying new instruments, or you're trying a new direction.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of a group saying, well, we want everything. We want to make an album so good that everything could potentially be a single. Mm-hmm. Not that other groups make throwaway stuff on purpose, but you do different styles or different tempos of songs that aren't necessarily single worthy, but they're part of what artistic statement you're trying to make.
Yeah.
When I re-listened to the album with that in mind, I'm like, they came pretty damn close.
They did.
Like any one of those. So, there's not really a clunker. There's no stinker on this. They're all great up-tempo songs.
Yeah, they are. But I would say that there are some similarities to, some of the non-hit.
Sure.
Some of the deeper tracks, they do have that, there's that New Sensation has that wonderful guitar riff to it, that flowing guitar riff.
Jingly, jangly, I love it.
There's a couple of songs that have that same, almost that same exact riff on it. So, there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say redundancy, but there's a little bit of that cross.
Using the ideas, using the
exactly.
same ideas.
And but they're no less catchy,
absolutely.
You
hit it on the head. This is a catchy album. It is quite accessible, quite listenable. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing about this album is they create this album, they put it in the can, they bring it to Atlantic Records,
and they didn't like it.
And they're like, "No, we're not feeling this. We don't think that this is really the right thing. So how about we do this?" This is what Atlantic Records says. How about we do this? Let's give you $1 million and you go back and you re-record something. Are you
not re-record what you did? Because
do something do it
over to do something.
$1 million, go re-record an album.
Because
I know,
Atlantic, to quote whoever it was, he said this is shit, and that's amazing. That is absolutely, the executive was like, because I think he said, he was sitting there and his eyes were closed the whole time listening to the album from beginning to end, and he just didn't feel it. How can you not?
6 million copies later. I hope he's doesn't
How
have
do
a
you
job.
not feel this record? I mean, yeah. Granted, these songs were way overplayed, and it's one of those albums for me that, it's hard to like. I actually have to admit that I was skipping over some of the hits because I wanted to get to some of those, the deeper tracks because I just didn't remember. Mm-hmm. But the overplay. But even so, how do you deny this record?
No, especially if you're listening to as an advance of here's what we're doing. I mean, and this I would have been like, yeah, how many,
and this is at the height of this type of music. You had, like you said, George Michael's Faith and Michael Jackson, and how do you not see that? Like, this is just as good, like, if not better.
They were splitting the hair of rock music and funk and stuff that's melodic and catchy, and they really literally walked a fine line where they were still making the rock fans happy, but then everything was like radio, like you said, New Sensation. Pff, come on, that's just an incredible song. I could listen to that song over and over. I really don't care. It's like because it's just so catchy. And Michael Hutchins' vocal performance on this album in a whole, but on New Sensation, I mean, he really is just going for it. He's like I always thought of Hutchins as like a combination of like Jim Morrison and Mick Jagger. Like he's got the qualities of both. He's got the peacock strutting of Jagger, but then he's got a little bit of the darkness and the melancholy of Morrison and that kind of swagger as well. Well, I always kind of put him in between those two.
It's funny you say that, because when they were talking about making a Doors film, I remember that he was, I don't know if he was actually in the running, but there was talk of him being Jim Morrison. And I don't know.
He would have you could make a good case for him.
But the thing of it is, it's like when I started hearing that kind of stuff, and then you think about, he definitely does have that swagger and that sexuality, I guess, that he really sells it. But I always figured, to me, he's kind of a cross between Morrison. Jagger's a really good example too, but also a little bit of Eddie Vedder. I think this could be. I always pictured Michael Hutchins to be more a rock and roll singer. He'd be perfect for that. But yet, he chose to do this sort of rock, pop, funk, whatever it is. And I always felt that he could have probably gone deeper, and much more like in the grunge era, especially. Like he could have been a welcome addition to that. I feel, because he had the presence for that.
Absolutely. He could command a stadium. There's a lot of.
If you've ever seen him live, I mean, you see these live clips of him, like, just totally commanding the audience and just
the band
exuding that presence and that,
and the band is just so on point too as well. So it's not just him out there singing and these guys are trying to keep up. I mean, this group just puts it all out there, and it's so good. I think Need You Tonight was like the first song, even though I listed them in some weird order, but I recall seeing the music video for Need You Tonight before anything. I think that was like the precursor with Mediate as like the backing add on song and add on to the video. I remember that as the lead single. And it wasn't my favorite. I was like, okay, this is kind of okay. It's kind of okay. INXS was already on my radar at that point. They had already started chalking up a lot of good songs. The riff for Need You Tonight, there's an interesting story about that. It's that dun 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 diddle 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 dun. So anyway, Andrew Farris, who's the keyboard player, was getting in a cab from his hotel. And he gets into the cab, and he says to the cab driver, "Hang on a second, I'll be right back." So he goes back up to the hotel room, and 45 minutes later, he comes back downstairs. And the cab driver was like pissed. Like, I thought you said it was a minute. He was upstairs for 45 minutes because he had the riff in his head, and he had to figure out a way to get it composed and get it written down. And then came back down when he had it, and then got in the cab. And the cab driver was like,
I think he actually recorded it on like a little cassette player. And he brought it
45 minutes. You could tell that was not New York City, because the cab driver would not have waited 45 minutes.
That's right. I mean, this is. I mean, I think they were told, right? Weren't they told by their the manager to go to Hong Kong and write more songs, because they were they had a few in the pocket, but they were
we need go work, go do more work.
Go do more work. So the two of them went and wrote the rest of the album.
I think his brother Tim, the drummer, had an apartment. In Hong Kong. So they're like, oh yeah, let's go over there. We'll hang out and we'll write and we'll get it done. And
just like in addition to that song, I think he goes, "This is a really great riff. Let me work with it." And I think within 10 minutes he had the lyrics of it. And it was like just like that.
That's a gift.
Absolutely.
It's a gift. It's a gift. There's not much to that song too. It's pretty sparse.
Yeah.
As far as songs go, it's really just that guitar
that's hard
riff
to do,
then,
though.
the
That simplicity,
vocal.
Simplicity of something like that is very hard. I would imagine it's very hard to do. At least that's what they say. Yeah. The more complex is something that they're like, whatever. I mean, they're used to doing.
You
could
just add, you just keep adding, and it's just like, okay, it gets bigger and bigger. But to be simple, I think Hutchins, his vocal kind of really, the riff and the counterpoint of his kind of breathy vocal with this hard, like jangly guitar. I think it kind of drives it home, and it's kind of like you've got this hard, like this jangly thing, and then his kind of breathy riff, and it's got like this just groovy guitar in there in the middle, like just kind of plucking on the strings. Mm-hmm. Really great, and of course, New Sensation is just like the hit of all.
That was always the one for me. That was always like that. That riff just kills it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just absolutely. And again, I think we did. I might have even remember saying, "Hey, play that song again. Play it again.
See that?
Play it again." You know what I mean?
I probably said gladly, because it was such a tight song. You got those stops and those starts, and you really need a band on point for that. To really, anybody could do it in the studio with editing and stuff, but I have a feeling they were just kind of knocking this stuff out of the park because they're so attuned to each other, especially with three brothers in the band. They kind of know, we've talked about that, where brothers that sing together, harmony or whatever, like there's something different about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with musicians in a band too. There's that thing that they have, and so when you've got like a guitar, a drummer, and a keyboard, so that's like most of the band right there,
Yeah, and especially if you're in tune with one another, you've been doing it for so long, and the bands that do stick together, after a while, you're going to get to know, each other very well. I mean, just within, you sometimes you probably finish somebody their sentences, and musically speaking as well, sort of like, let me fill that gap right there. And instinctively just step in and know what to do. So that, it's always a great thing when a band is that cohesive.
Yeah. And then another song was Devil Inside, which, and what might be triggering like your thought that a lot of it is kind of similar is there's a lot of riffs in these songs, right? They're, from Never Tear Us Apart, from Devil Inside, that's got like a particular riff. Need You Tonight has a particular riff. New Sensation has a particular riff as well, that kind of propel these songs. So I think, it's easy maybe to get lulled into that and say, oh, okay, it's kind of, there's certain ideas there that they're kind of messing with. But it doesn't exactly sound the same, but you can absolutely hear that they're on this, in this groove.
You could almost say that this was the sound for the album, which basically you could say that it was the concept, was to have this very danceable type of music, and it just flows, so each track has that same feel and vibe to it. So it there's really no other, I would say probably Never Tear Us Apart might be the
only ballad.
The only ballad, and that's sort of the, I wouldn't say dark horse of the album, because but it just sounds so different in comparison to the rest of the record.
It's got that strings, it's got that ripping sax.
Yeah,
that just comes in. Like oh, so they're just so like, they just give you so many looks at things. Which I really enjoy about that. That they're not just even if they're dancing with a certain type of idea musically. Yeah, they just look at it from different angles, which. I really enjoyed about this, and I haven't listened to this in ages. This album. Yeah,
it's interesting how to describe the song as it being sort of a Fats Domino, like bluesy, kind of almost like an early Rolling Stones record. And I totally see that. Even with the strings, like when the Stones started doing that kind of stuff. I totally see that vibe to it. It would be interesting to hear though, just the song by just with the
raw
piano,
version of it,
the raw version of it, which unfortunately is not on the extended re-release. I mean, there is another version, but it would have been more. I would have loved to have heard that, just without all the strings and everything. So
and here we go. Here's a Doctor Strange connective statement is, you know, when you have all these, you know, it's like the multiverse of music editions, right? There's so many different releases, but then they all have like different stuff, but you want something from the other one, but then there's another release that's got other stuff that they found. Just put one damn thing out with everything.
Yeah,
right? We don't need 15 different special releases.
It's a problem. Remixes and I was never into remixes or you know, like extended dance stuff, and you know, the 7-inch, 12-inch single. You know, they have these names like attached to it, like the, you know, the Tom something.
Yeah, the DJ that mixes it. Yeah, the guy that does it.
Whatever. And it's like
does it up.
I never cared for that. I'm more into like how they were working up a song in particular, like demos. I'd rather hear B-sides, songs that didn't make the album, that kind of stuff.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. That's always
I'd rather
been
hear
more interesting to me.
The skeletal
like
stuff and when they're working through it, and you kind of hear, oh wow, it sounds totally different than what it started out as. You know, that gives you a glimpse into like the creative aspect of songwriting and music creation. For me, that's really what keeps me coming, especially when those special editions come out. Is unreleased stuff or workups, demos,
and it can give you new insight into what the finished product is. Even if you're like, you know, especially if you're like really tired of a particular song and you're kind of tired, and you go back and listen to like an early demo, and then you start to appreciate the song in its raw form, and you know, because the lyrics could speak to you a different way, you know, and then you go back and you listen, and it's like, oh, you know, this is because you're not really paying attention to the lyrics because you're paying attention to the production.
Yeah,
sometimes like the way the song sounds and when it's out there, but then you really break it down, and that's, you know, sometimes that's some, you know, we talked about this with Pet Sounds and with Tusk and, you know, albums of that nature.
You got to get ready for that bell. It's gonna pop. You never know when it's gonna pop off, so you got to be ready. But I mean, this was such a monster that, you know, Rolling Stone had a readers poll in 1988. Of best albums. This came in number 3.
Yeah.
So it was that impactful. Yeah. It's very easy, kind of, because of everything that happened with INXS, with the passing of Michael Hutchence, and we'll talk about it a little bit about how they tried to reconfigure. You know, INXS kind of got lost in the wash. You know, because their albums after this, they put an album called X, which was a couple of years later, had Suicide Blonde on it and a couple of other good songs, but nothing matched Kick. Right. Like Kick was them shooting for the stars and getting it right, and making it to that upper echelon that they finally did, where they were playing these massive stadiums and giant crowds, and you know, that rock and roll dream that everybody kind of shoots for. Yeah, this was the album that put them over the edge. So you said you didn't really you said you focused mainly on non-album tracks.
Right. Yeah. Well, not for this hits. Listen.
Yeah. Not the hits, because you're kind of like, I know that. So skip.
Guns in the Sky. I love,
say it.
Well, I love Kick.
Okay. Now my favorite, you haven't gotten him. My favorite song on this album entirely is not a hit.
Mystify. I mean, it's a single, but it's not a hit, but it is a great track. Yeah.
I love Mystify. It's got that piano that you could tell it's the electronic piano of the time, but it still has a great sound to it. The finger snapping, it's just kind of got a really good vocal by him. And that, to me, when I think of songs like Mystify, that proves to me that mission accomplished. Like, we want to make an album of everything that could be a single.
That's right, and it didn't have to be in the top 10.
Just was a Mystify is, to use the vernacular of the pleasantry, a banger. It's a banger.
It is.
It absolutely is. Highlight.
Wildlife is great. Calling All Nations. Again, those riffs. You know, that same kind of jangly riff going on there, but it's a solid album all the way through. And then you got, you know, then of course you got the hits, and you know, so, but you know, it was really a pleasant return to this, and it really brought back a lot of great stuff for me too. So, you know,
like I said earlier, I haven't listened to this in ages.
Yeah,
in ages, probably, you know. Obviously, you turn on the radio, you hear this and that, but to sit down and give this a proper listen, and it's on my list. Oddly enough, when I started buying vinyl, I bought Listen Like Thieves first. I figured that one was going to be harder to get. So I was like, you know, I saw Listen, I was like, all right, let me grab that one.
Yeah.
Haven't gotten around to getting Kick yet, but it's absolutely on the list because, especially after revisiting it, I was listening to, oh my God, this really was a standout in that year.
Yeah.
You know, of all the music, 87, you could look at that, the changes that were on the horizon with Guns N' Roses arriving on the scene.
Right.
And really, really taking hard rock by the scruff of the neck and pulling it forward and pulling it out of the hair metal days. They really did that. And Bad, which was the follow-up to Thriller, which everybody was waiting for Michael Jackson's next album. Like this was good. Thriller had unseated Rumors as the biggest selling album of all time. And it was just kind of like, what's he going to do next? And that was going to be like, what do you do after you have the biggest selling album of all time?
Which was far edgier than Thriller, I might add.
Yeah.
I remember Bad being like, I don't think it was as accepted. People just love, whatever. But I always liked Bad better. I mean, it had some,
and that
again,
the music video directed by Scorsese.
Yeah. Had those harder edged, like really, again, really danceable, catchable, but also like those rock tinges to it, almost like, he might have been like maybe emulating Prince a little bit there on certain, with guitar riffs and things like that.
Definitely free to do what he wanted at that point. Yeah. I mean, he had, the world was his oyster. So the music video for Bad, that beginning part with Wesley Snipes and I'll show you who's bad. I'll show you who's bad. Filmed in hometown Dobbs Ferry, New York at the Master School, that black and white section.
Yeah.
I'll show you who's bad.
That's great.
And then, of course, Weird Al would take that to the nth degree with Fat. I'm fat.
Now, do you think that? I mean, we talked about them hitting. Was this their peak, or could they have done more? Had they just, they kind of, they did, unfortunately get caught up in the mix, I guess, I suppose. But do you really think they could have done?
I think they started to wane. I think they waned pretty fast. I think this was probably lightning in a bottle for them. They had kind of, like I said, with the album X, Suicide Blonde is definitely a harder, still got those dancey elements, but they were kind of, I think they'd kind of found the sound and said, okay, this is really what works and we're good at it.
Yeah.
But you can't keep doing that over and over.
Right.
You kind of can't. And that's why Listen Like Thieves and Kick is such a great 1-2. Yeah, but it's kind of like a harder. It's like a harder edge with that one.
I guess that's my point. Is that you think they could have, in the grunge era, could have done a far more rock oriented record and just be more edgy, that much edgier and that much more waning off the danceable stuff and making it just full on.
They put 3 albums out in the 90s. I mean, 4 technically, but 3. They put out X in 1990 and Welcome to Wherever You Are in 92, and then Full Moon, Dirty Hearts in 93. So they were certainly prolific. But yeah, it's kind of like that, if things are happening around you, like grunge, and you don't realize, right? Or you kind of, and that's what happened to a lot of these bands from the 80s, is things had shifted so quickly.
That's right. Yeah.
That you're not, if you react to it, you're going to look like a poser, right? You're going to be like, oh, now we're grunge. So what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Do you say, oh, well, and I'll use the Cult as an example. The Cult switch gears in 85 from this goth, kind of goth alternative band into like a metal hard rock band. And then once like 91, 92 hit, they tried to pivot again to respond to the grunge thing and kind of change their sound again. It's like, okay, well now what are you doing this for? So you got to be careful with that. You try and like cash in on this new thing. If it's not authentic,
right,
it's going to be like, okay, yeah, here's an old band from the 80s trying to, sound contemporary. So it's a tough line. I think you gotta, like we did our REM episode, right? Where how they were able to thrive, not only survive, but thrive. And I think you got to stay the course, right? I think you just gotta plow through it and hopefully you get, you come out on the other side. And, unfortunately Hutchins, in 1997 would take his own life. He hung himself. There was a really unfortunate incident that happened with him in 92. So he had started, just a downward spiral, but in 1992, he had a fight with a taxi driver and he got pushed on the ground or fell and he fractured his skull, but he didn't go to the doctor. And what happened as a result, which I can't even imagine, he lost his sense of smell and he lost his sense of taste, like permanently.
Wow.
And it sent him into like it started a spiral of depression, and then taking drugs. And, I can't even imagine that. Like, like something like that happening to you. It's life change. It's not just, I broke my arm and now my, elbow clicks or something. It's not,
sure. Yeah.
So it kind of started him on a path to, basically self-destruction, at that point. So it's unfortunate. So I think that kind of started to signal the beginning of the end for them. As far as Hutchins was concerned, he just started to spiral. He dabbled in acting. He did a movie, Dogs in Space. He'd done a couple other things as well. But yeah, I think to answer your question in 5 minutes later, I think Kick was the pinnacle. And you know what a pinnacle. Like, it's no slouch. We're not doing this one because it's an unheard classic that we love. This is like a monster album, from a group that really deserved it. Like, these guys like had it coming. Worked hard, kind of worked through how to write songs and slightly tweak their sound, and then they just they hit it.
Yeah,
they just found that like, I guess that sliver of time where they could slide in with this album. Go against the record company as well. I mean, I don't know what the record company was looking for at that point. I don't know what Sound Atlantic, maybe, I don't know. I can't even tell you, because there's so much diverse stuff out in 87 that I don't even know what they could have been saying. Well, why don't you sound more like, John Mellencamp? Well, no, they're not like that. What is an INXS anyway?
Mm-hmm.
They're a rock band.
Yeah.
But they started dabbling in these funk textures and funk sounds, and they crammed the two together, and then you got something that was different from everything else. You can't fault them for that. That's why we love it, because in the beginning, when I rattled off all those other artists, they're all particular unto themselves. There really wasn't someone that sounded like George Michael. There wasn't somebody that sounded, Guns N' Roses spawned a lot of imitators, but when they burst onto the scene, that was like, punching rock and roll in the teeth.
Yeah.
At the time, there wasn't anything like, it was like, we'd seen Poison and all the hair, the spandex and the makeup, and then they just come in and just kind of start kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah. They had that. There was a rawness to that band that just completely restored your faith in rock,
So then what do? Do you try and be like them? Do you try and, you got to go with your gut, and, it could have went the other way if they're like $1 million. Sure. What they should have done, is they should have taken the money and then just slightly remixed the album and said, "Here you go."
And he probably would have been like, "Yeah, this is great."
Yeah, and then brought it to a different executive. The other guy told us to come back and redo this album. Here, this is the best we got. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry to take your money. Here we go, and it just get I think artists have done that in the past, actually. I think there was a couple of artists where the label said, we don't want this or something. They just went back and resubmitted it, and someone else said, okay, yeah. I swear that's happened. I have to look it up. I swear it's happened.
Yeah.
Where they're like, we'll just resubmit it. That's like me in high school. Rewrite your homework.
There you go.
And then I just go home and just flatten it out and make it less crumply, and then resubmit it.
Not change a word, but
not even rewrite it. Just flatten it out, put it under some books and make it look like it's on new paper. So I can empathize with INXS and the dilemma they had. So after Michael Hutchins passed away in 97, they kind of went dormant. They did some one-off benefit shows with special guest vocalists. Then in 2005, there was a reality show called Rockstar, where INXS is looking for a new singer.
That's right.
It's and I heard this. I'm like, oh man, he's going to take a big steaming dump on the legacy of INXS. So the winner was this guy, JD Fortune. He actually sounded like Hutchins. They had that one song. They had the one big hit, which went to number 11, called Dirty Vegas. Sounded like the INXS of old. I remember. I'm like, wow, this is pretty close. Not too bad. Yeah. But they banged around with him for a while, and he was having some substance abuse. They let him go. They brought him back, and then they actually in 2011 or 20, they just stopped calling him. Mm-hmm. And INXS didn't officially break up, but they've been dormant ever since.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things. It's like, I'll put it on the level of the Doors. Like, you lose Morrison, like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
You lose Michael Hutchence. He was such a part, he was such a big presence in the band as a songwriter,
of course,
just as the vocalist, as the face of the band, especially in the 80s, like you said, with all the MTV music videos, he became synonymous with that. Like, that was, such a visual medium in the 80s, and he was such a big part of it that maybe you do leave it behind. I don't know. What do you think?
You could say the same thing about Queen too, right? I mean, I never understood why they would even want to continue without Freddie, with another singer. And, I don't know.
Well, Queen is different though, right? Queen, I think we talked about where they're not trying to replace Freddie Mercury, right? They're just trying to they're trying to continue the legacy of Queen and say, we want people to hear these songs. And we definitely talked about it because I dragged Paul Rogers. I was like, what the hell is Paul Rogers doing in Queen? But Adam Lambert is someone that can perform these songs, and he's not trying to be. But J.D. Fortune or this whole reality show they did was to find a replacement.
Yeah.
For and obviously this guy sounded like him, so that's what they were going for, to carry on in that way. Queen is not putting out new music, right? With this situation, they put out new music, so they were going to kind of go on, kind of like Journey or any of those other bands. With Queen, it's kind of like we're not going to put anything new, but we want to celebrate the legacy of this music. And here's someone that can do justice to the songs. He's not Freddie, he's not trying to be, but here it is. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, and normally I'd be harder on that stuff. Me. Normally I'm like, I'm kind of like a prick when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't like it, but I'm okay. For some reason, I'm okay with it. I'm like, yeah, go out there and sing Queen songs. I love it. Get it out there in front of people.
You don't want to see a Brian May, who's an extremely talented guitar. I mean, he's a god as far as that. You don't want to see them retire. You don't want to see them fade away. Because and to say that Freddie Mercury was the band and that kind of thing. So yeah, I get that. But on the other hand, it's like, but yeah, he was, you know what I mean? Like, he was, the presence was felt, and it's just not the same band. It's just, they could continue to make music, but it's just not.
I don't think anybody would want it. That's the thing is
exactly.
So now you're caught between a rock and a hard
place.
You
go off and do your own thing, like or form a new band, or
you keep putting out greatest hits. You keep putting out compilate. Like, what does your
to
life
me
become?
That's overkill. I don't care for that either. I don't care for the cashing in of.
So what's left
of carrying on and just touring for the sake of touring and just singing the hits and all that kind of stuff. I don't care for that either. Just let it go. Like that.
I think that's why INXS packed it in. I think that's why they packed it in. I think they weren't feeling it. It was kind of like, this was kind of a move made with intention of trying to find somebody to replace Hutchence, and the guy, the guy's irreplaceable. Now, if they went in a different direction, right? If they said we're going to get just somebody totally different, and reinvent ourselves, a la Sammy Hagar, right? It can be done. You just have to. And it's weird, right? AC/DC was in the same situation. Their lead singer died. They just went out and got another guy that was like on the old lead singer, but on steroids. He was like the nuclear. Brian Jones, like the nuclear version of, of him. So of Bon Scott. So it's kind of, I'm almost sounding like I'm contradicting myself, but you have to choose it carefully if you're going to do something like that. Do you want an imitator, or do you want a fresh look at things? And will people go along with that ride?
Well, I'm
or
for
are
that.
you afraid?
I'm definitely afraid. If you're going to do it, do something a little bit different. Try to, change it up to try to just, bring somebody in just to do that, and that's why I am not a fan of the Queen legacy thing. I was never a fan of Adam Lambert coming on just to sing the hits. And, to me, it's just not, these guys are talented enough to do more, to write some great, music, whatever. I mean, I'm sure they did. I mean, I'm obviously Brian May got into, soundtracks, and, they all went off and did their own composing and all that kind of thing. But it's just, but to
and these guys never really did that.
when you have to say, this isn't, Queen was something special because of what we had, and to carry that on and just to keep going with it, it just to me feels a bit, I hate to say it, but like it's not selling out, but you're sort of cashing in, falling back on your laurels and that kind of thing.
People got to eat.
Yeah, they do. True that. Right? But it's like,
Roger Taylor's got to eat.
But you can look at.
I'm sure they don't need the money.
Alex Lifeson, like he's in a new band now with a girl singer. He totally like just shed, like he sold off all his guitars.
But he's not saying that this is. Yeah, he's not saying this is Rush 2.0. He's saying this is something different.
This is something different. I'm doing something different here, and that's. But when I like that. I mean, that to me is you're going to carry on.
But how do you do that with INXS? How do you do that when you've got 5 other band members, right? This was a 6-piece band, so you've got 5 band members, and the lead singer passes away. So what is the drummer start his own band, and are you going to listen to them really?
Sometimes,
are you going to listen to? Are you going to listen to Andrew Farris, his band? So they were really kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because they were so well
when it's
recognized.
Unexpected like that, sure. Yeah, when he he takes his own life, and you're just kind of like it's. Yeah, you're kind of like stuck in it, like limbo. You're like, we didn't expect this to happen. Yeah, it's not like we had a say.
Yeah, or they said we're firing you. Like there's not any conscious decision that they're making of this is not working. We're gonna do it's kind of like this guy. They would have continued on. I guarantee you, INXS probably would have continued on.
Yeah.
Surprised actually probably should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame already.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they've been inducted. That's a good question. I don't know, but they should be. They certainly deserve it. And it was 25 years.
Yeah. If they're not, they definitely.
Yeah, they're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame yet.
Surprising.
Yeah,
but it's
as long as they get in before Nickelback.
That was interesting.
I don't think they did it, so I don't think we have to worry.
Somebody had mentioned on the page that they were talking about Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they have these artists that aren't rock in this thing. So how do you feel about that? Like what you said, I think you mentioned that they should change the name.
Yeah, just change the name. Make it the Music Hall of Fame. It's fine.
Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and then you just open it up. Then you don't get people complaining and whining. Yeah. Fine.
I don't understand how somebody like Dolly Parton can be considered rock.
She's not, but it and that's why they're starting to broaden the definition. So the bottom line is we need INXS in on the strength of this, even if this was the only album they ever put out, they should get in, but it's not. And that's why, everybody I think needs to listen to this album. Even if you're not an 80s fan or it's not your generation of music, it doesn't really sound dated. There are some 80s tropes that we talk about a lot. They use keyboards, but it's not that 80s synthesizer-y stuff. They use like the keyboards for like horns and stuff like that. So I think that this, we can make a strong case for this is a somewhat of an un-80s album. It's definitely got some of the earmarks of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I listen to it, I'm like this, the only way it would sound dated is because I was there when it came out.
Yeah.
But if you kind of take that off and you listen to it, it sounds like a lot of the stuff that's coming out now. So somewhat, it's got it's got the funky stuff. It's got the really rhythmy stuff. Rhythmy, is that a word?
Yeah,
rhythmy. We just made it up.
Let's say rhythmic. I think rhythmic is the term.
Yes, but I like rhythmy. It sounds fun. Rhythmy.
I agree.
I think what I mean is I think it kind of transcends. It stands the test of time.
It does.
Nostalgia because of you have fond memories, but I think someone else can listen to this and totally enjoy it.
Yeah, young audience today would totally dig it.
Yeah, and Hutchins,
like you say, because there are bands out there that are emulating this stuff anyway. So so what's in vogue right now? I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag. It really is. It's a mixed bag. I listen to some of the stuff my son's into, and I'm like, whoa, that sounds like that. Or, it's crazy.
I think they could fit. And you know what? Hutchins tears through this album. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
As we wind this down, you got to give this guy credit. I mean, he is the anchor. He's got 5 pros behind him, and that's the good thing is we got solid backing. it allows him just to do what he needs to do as well, and use his instrument, which is his voice. And like on that song Kick, I mean, he's ripping into it, and Mystify is a little bit more sedate, but still's got that power behind it. So he really just kind of lays it out there. And that's the great thing about Hutchins is he can do the rock and roll snarly stuff. He can do the light, like ballady stuff. I'm sure Never Tear Us Apart was probably popular, probably more from the female perspective. It was kind of like the heartthrobby Michael Hutchins. But then he could do stuff Mystify, which is kind of funky. And, he was just able to handle it all. Like anything that was thrown his way. And that's what made INXS so good is that, I think the word, I just came upon it, versatile.
Yeah.
I think they're a very versatile band.
I totally agree with that.
They could do like whatever they set their mind to, they could do. Because their other stuff before each one was kind of a little different. Some of it was more 80s. But this one, it stands. I think it stands head and shoulders in their catalog, and I think anybody would say that as well.
Yeah,
would you say it?
I would say it.
Do you concur?
I concur.
3324 podcast stamp of approval has been put on INXS Kick, and I think that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324
really
podcast.
Not much else to say. I mean, I think we
except for go listen to it.
I guess we made the case.
Yeah, listen to this damn thing because you're really going to enjoy it. Like I feel, like I said, I feel it's timeless. So check it out. Take the journey with INXS to see where, a group at the height of their powers, knocking it out of the park, despite what their bosses told them. How often do you go against your boss and you get rewarded handsomely for it? The INXS did it. They bucked the odds and they just said, you know what, we're not, this is what we want. And the artist was right. So, and I'm glad for it because I would have never had that in my cassette deck playing over and over incessantly.
Great success story. I mean, you don't hear too many, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot of great success stories.
Yeah.
Probably.
And for some reason, I was always rooting for these guys. It just seemed like Hutchins was like the front rock star, but these other guys were just kind of back there, just kind of getting it done. They weren't like the flashiest, but they're competent, really tight musicians. And that's what I respect more than anything is they were able to show up and just kind of deliver really good music without the flash. Yeah. Maybe without the pizzazz. That's Hutchins's job, is to mesmerize you and give you that visual. Their job in the back was just to deliver the foundation for him to do what he needed to do. And INXS did it fabulously.
He's the ultimate front man.
He's one of them.
We're one of them.
One of them. I mean, if we ever did the top 5, we can't because it would be easy, but
it'd be very easy.
He'd be a top contender for the top 5 frontmen. So that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Thank you for joining us as we get back into the Wayback Machine, come back into the present time, and thank you for joining us. And I'm reminding you once again to join us on social media at 3324 podcast. You're going to hear the bumper at the end of this. I don't know why I do it at the end because we paid someone to tell it the same exact thing again. But people say, I've read that, well, when the host or someone says it live, it has more impact and they don't listen to the end anyway. So I guess this is my way of just kind of doubling down and making sure that you understand that we really want to see you on social media. We want to interact with you. So join us there, won't you? I think you'll have a really great time. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.